Visually, breaststroke appears to be very different than the other strokes, particularly when it comes to how the arms are used to create propulsion. At the same time, the same principles are used to create propulsion. While there is a lot more lateral motion in the pull, almost all that lateral motion is due to the impact of the recovery of the arms rather than the pull itself. Let's find out why. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. In the breaststroke pull, there is a lot of lateral motion, and it's often thought to involve sculling in order to create propulsion. While the lateral motion is undoubtedly present, it's not due to sculling, but to reposition the arms in order to set up the stroke to create a lot of propulsion and then transition out of that propulsive action to get ready for the next stroke. The lateral motion during the setup of the stroke is to put the arms in position so that they can effectively move water backward, and the lateral motion during the pull itself is to smooth the transition of the recovery, which necessarily needs to move forward instead of backwards. So all of the lateral motion is not necessarily propulsive in and of itself, but it's necessary in order to set up the stroke and then transition to the recovery. Let's see it in action. After the arms recover in breaststroke, the hands are together, and that's a very different position than freestyle and butterfly. In freestyle and butterfly, the hands are entering the water at about shoulder width, and so they're already in position to be effective to set up a great pull. So in breaststroke, there needs to be some lateral movement right to there in order to get in a position where swimmers can get the hand deeper, the elbow up, and the forearm facing backwards in order to create a lot of propulsion. This initial motion is not a scull, it's a repositioning so that the hands can get a little bit wider than the shoulders so that they can round out and they can set up an effective pull like the swimmer has just done here. And so if we pause here in this position, this looks very much like butterfly in terms of what he's about to do. But if he were to start that pull from this position, he wouldn't be able to get there. So he has to slide out, and then he can set things up just like he would in butterfly. So the beginning of the pull is not a scull, it's a repositioning of the arms so that they can get wide. And once they're wide, then swimmers can set up a pull that's very much like butterfly. The arms are oriented backwards, and he's going to basically pull backwards in order to move himself forward. So right there, you can see sliding out, setting up right there, and then he's going to pull back right there. So again, this lateral motion is not so much a propulsive scull, it's a repositioning of the hands so that the forearms can be faced backwards so swimmers can pull to move themselves forward. Now, are really, really good swimmers taking water with them when they slide the hands out? Yes, probably. However, the main purpose is to reposition the arms effectively. And that all starts with the hand together entry, reaching full extension with the hands together, and then sliding them out in order to reposition to set up the pull. So we'll watch a couple more cycles of it so you can see setting up and then pulling. Sliding out, setting up, and then pulling. Sliding out, setting up, and then pulling. Now, when it comes to the pull itself, what we'll see is swimmer sets up the stroke, and he's going to pull back, and he's also going to pull in. The elbows are going to move into the body. Now, why is that happening? When butterfly, as we talked about, we get into the same position as breaststroke here. Breaststroke and butterfly is very similar at this point. But in butterfly, the hands are going to move straight back. They're going to finish at the hips. And so the hands can move directly backwards. But if swimmers are going to do that in breaststroke, they have to recover the hands forward. So when they pull back, there has to be some inward motion of the pull in order to get the hands positioned so that they can be recovered forward. So right here, we're basically in butterfly land, but the pull has got to be back and in, not to create more propulsion, but if that doesn't happen, the hands are going to get stuck behind the body. And that's going to be very, very difficult for swimmers to recover the hands directly forward. So from here to maybe there, it's pretty similar to butterfly, but at this point, instead of just continuing to swim back, swimmers have to pull in order to get the hands recovered forward. So again, the purpose of the lateral motion is not to create more propulsion. It probably actually compromises propulsion to some extent, but it's all about optimizing the trade-off between creating a little bit more propulsion and recovering the arms with a lot less resistance. And so you see that when some swimmers get into this position and then they pull back a little bit too far, they get stuck. Their hands are stuck down deeper than they want them to be. The elbows are back further than they want them to be, and that becomes very difficult to recover forward. Swimmers are going to slow down because they're moving the arms through a really big range of motion when creating a lot of resistance. So again, it's all about pulling and optimizing the transition to the recovery. So swimmers are trying to pull back as much as they can, move water backwards kind of right through there as much as they can, but they also have to move in a little bit in order to set the arms up to be recovered forward. If not, they're going to get stuck, and that's going to slow them down a lot more than that little bit of extra propulsion is going to speed them up. So we'll take a look at another swimmer from a slightly different angle. And so the beginning of the stroke starts with the hands together out in front rather than wider, shoulder width apart, as you see in freestyle and butterfly. So the hands need to slide out until they're in that position. And then boom, he's in a butterfly position. He's got the arms set up to move a lot of water backwards. And then he's going to squeeze backwards. So right there, there's a pretty backward oriented pull. And you can see his acceleration forward as a result. But there's also that inward part to the pull so that he can get the hands recovered forward. If he were to pull back with the hands, he's going to be in big trouble from a recovery standpoint. And so in order to keep pulling backwards without moving the hands backwards, there's going to be that inward pull to the body, that squeeze in. Now we're going to be back in the front of the stroke with the hands together. And again, he's got to slide them out so he can get in a position to open the armpit up, get the forearms facing backwards, and then he's squeezing back. And he's also going to come in, not to create more propulsion, but to facilitate the recovery of the arms without increasing the amount of resistance he's going to create moving forward or compromising the pull very much. So he can still create a really powerful pull, but he's going to have to pull in and back as opposed to just back in order to make it happen. So sliding out to set it up, and then pulling in to facilitate the arm recoveries. And so if you look at the hand path that swimmers are actually creating, it's very circular, but the main intention, the main power that they're going to create is right here where it's predominantly backwards with the forearm and the hand facing backwards. That's where most of the gas comes from, but swimmers have to do all sorts of different things in order to get into that position and then to get out of that position. All the lateral motion is not necessarily to create propulsion in and of itself. It's to set up this really powerful pull here and then to transition out of that pull in order to recover with as little resistance as possible. One more swimmer here, starting with the hands together and then sliding out. And then right there, we're in that butterfly position. Her arms are facing backwards. She's set up to pull, and right there, she's going to pull herself forwards. And when she gets towards the back of the pull, she's got to come in so that she can recover the arms forward and then shoot them forward easily. As we talked about in the previous examples, the purpose of the lateral motion is not so much to create propulsion, but to set up the really powerful backward pull that allows swimmers to move forward, but they've got to set it up with lateral motion, and they've got to transition out of that pull right there in order to help swimmers recover the arms effectively. If they don't transition into that position, it's going to be a much less effective position. And if they don't transition out of that position effectively, they're going to create a lot more resistance when they try to move the arms forward through the water. If you want to learn more about how to help swimmers create a ton of propulsion with their arms, check out the video below.